Welcome. Thank you all for coming this afternoon. I'm Karen Knapstein. I'm one of the editors for Shield Wall Media. And I thank you for coming on behalf of the show and Rollforming magazine, which we publish. And today, Michelle Sherman from Apex Capital is going to speak with you about financing equipment and machinery, correct?
Money in general.
Okay, so
Thank
it's all
you.
yours.
Thanks, everybody. So this is going to be riveting. So I just hope you're all really ready for like one of the most exciting talks you've ever had, because money is super exciting. How to use it, what to do with it, how to get it, how to get more of it. No, it's pretty dry, but we're going to try and. My goal is to show you that money is a tool like any other tools. It's no different than a hammer or a stapler or a roll former. If you use the right tool for the right job, you're going to get the right result, and that's really the bottom line. And there are lots of different tools. You have cash, line of credit, a commercial loan, leasing, and third-party financing, right? Kind of obvious. But here's the real surprise, and this is what a lot of people really don't know, that over $1.7 trillion was spent on equipment, machinery in 2018. It takes them a while to compile these numbers. This is the most recent numbers. 1.7 trillion. Of that, 1.22 trillion was financed. So people tend to assume that people are using their cash and, oh, you finance if you don't have money and use a bank loan. Oh, if I don't have the money, I'll finance it. If I don't have the money, I'll borrow it. No. If you look at that, 72%, 1.22 trillion of it was financed. 85% of US companies are actually financing equipment. So now you're talking of that 1.7 trillion, you got 1.2 trillion, they're using either a financing or a leasing. And here's the next surprise for people. Only 13% are choosing a line of credit. People also tend to think, I'm gonna go use my line of credit. We're gonna talk about why in a minute. But this is sort of that broad picture of how are these different tools being used, where is that money going, and how much money is really happening out there on machinery. Quite a bit. 13% are using line of credit, and only 29%, only 500 billion, chose cash for machinery and software and any those types of assets to run your business. So one of the reasons, of course, is the Section 179 tax savings. Anybody know what that is? Does everybody know what that is? Everybody in the back know what that is? Okay, just kidding. All right, so when you purchase anything for your business, okay, just about any type of machinery, whether it's a computer, whether it's a forklift, whether it's a piece of machinery, phones, pretty much anything that runs your business, you can put into what's called the Section 179 write-off. And you get to write off the entire amount. And over the years, they have increased and increased and increased that amount. 20 years ago, it was 25,000, and then it went to 50,000, and then actually the first President Bush took it to 150,000, and then from there it just started to take off like a rocket, and then it went to 500,000, stayed at 500,000 for a while, and now your maximum deduction is $1 million. So you have, but that means you have to make $2.5 million, show $1 million in profit to take $1 million. So, yeah, I don't really think they need to raise it again because people don't like to put that much as profit on their taxes anyway, even if they are making it. So, really, what you're going to end up doing is show you an example. Here's the example. Here's the purpose of Section 179. So when people say to you, oh, you get your tax write-off if you buy the machine. Now, no matter how you buy the machine, no matter which tool you use, the hammer, the stapler, the line of credit, the cash, the loan, it doesn't matter. You can do this. And you're going to take your equipment costs, it's called a $125,000 roll former. You can take the entire purchase in the first year as the write-off. So assuming this new tax bracket, common corporate tax bracket of the 21%, you're saving $26,000 and change on the machine. Your net cost of the equipment is $98,000. Makes sense? So, and you can do that up to $1 million. You just keep throwing everything that you buy this year in that bucket, and just give it all to your accountant. Say, I bought this, I bought this, I bought this, I bought this. He's gonna put it all into that one bucket, under that umbrella of section 179, write it off. And it does not matter how you buy it. Where does some of the credits and rates and like, who decides how I'm gonna borrow my money? What's it gonna cost me to borrow my money? You know, people say, you know, well, I've got this score and I've got that, and you know, what does that mean? Well, when you're a company and you come to borrow money from a bank, whether it's a brick and mortar type bank or a third party lender like ourselves, it's more than a score, right? All these different factors come into play. So your time in business is your big blue chunk there. Your pay history is your personal credit score. The amount borrowed is an interesting part of the puzzle that a lot of times people don't think about. And then your cash flow is a really small piece of the puzzle that people also think would be a bigger piece of the puzzle. Here's why. Your amount borrowed, the more you're gonna borrow, the cheaper it is to borrow. Kind of makes sense when you really think about it, right? But then some people think, if I got a $10,000 machine, my God, what do you mean the rate's 10%? Well, because they can't possibly, no matter how good your credit is, make any money on lending you $10,000 at 4% or 3%, right? But if they're lending you $150,000 and they're charging you 10%, well, then you better have a bankruptcy or a problem, okay? Now, they should be lending that to you at 4% or 3%, or depending on where the rates are at the top. Right now, $150,000 at an A or B credit should be getting 4% and change. But that same A or B credit company, if they want to borrow $10,000, they're going to be paying 8, 9%, 10%. Because it's impossible for the bank, it doesn't make sense for the bank to loan money. Which is why the amount borrowed and the asset itself come into play when it comes to rates and so on. So very often, if somebody comes to me, they want to borrow, do a loan for $5,000 or $7,000, we'll have the conversation and I'll say, probably doesn't make sense, right? That's not the right tool for that job. That's probably a cash purchase right now. You know, if you have the cash, it's a cash purchase. This doesn't make sense. Your pay history as the owner of a business, until you're more than 10 years in business and are at least 10 employees, your personal credit as the owner will always play into any type of financing, whether it's at your bank for a bank loan, whether you're trying to get a line of credit, or whether you're trying to get an equipment finance at a third-party lender like us. It won't matter. You'll say, oh, I'm a corporation. Won't matter, because you are the corporation. If you are closely held, which means you are 6 owners or less, it's all about you. So at the end of the day, they are looking at you. They're looking at your habits. They want to know if you pay your bills. And one of the reasons, the other interesting thing to me, which I know, that means I need a hobby, true, is that people think, well, what about my cash flow, right? I have all this cash flow. How come that doesn't mean anything? Well, you can have all the cash in the bank and show your bank statements and say, well, look, we've got all this money. You're not paying your bills with it. They don't really care how much money you have in the bank. You're not paying your bills with it on time. So it doesn't matter, right? Does not matter. It plays the obvious point of you have to be able to cover the payment, right? But it actually does not matter. I've had customers say, well, we got $1 million in the bank. That's great. Pay your credit cards. Pay your $50 a month to Visa, and you wouldn't be having this conversation with me, right? So it's really, it is a pie. There is more than one part that goes into all of it. And again, doesn't matter if it's your brick and mortar bank that knows you, knows your family, been in town forever, you go to them, they're still gonna look at the whole pie. Or, you know, someone like us, one of the equipment folks downstairs recommends someone like us. Won't matter, that's gonna come into play. So let's talk about the actual different tools. You know, what's a line of credit? Right? Line of credit, you go to your local bank, they go through that credit process we just talked about, and they decide you are worth $50,000. Right, 100. Yeah, nice one. $100,000. So they give you a $100,000 line of credit at 7%, because that's where your rate falls, based on how long you've been in business, how you pay your bills on time, and all that. Now, for a line of credit, that's a really good rate, because a line of credit has no asset attached to it, right? You could go and buy your friend some beer with that, right? Nothing that they could come back and get, right? If you don't pay it back, it's just air, right? There's nothing attached to it. So a line of credit's always gonna have a higher rate because there's nothing attached to it. You can do anything you want with it. Go to the Bahamas. That means do whatever you want. They hope you're gonna pay it back. It also has a floating rate. So it has a floating rate, and it's really for fast cash. It's so that when you get that job and you go, hey, we just closed that job today. Wow, we've got to buy all that metal. We've got to get all this stuff in so we can actually do that job, right? Now you got to get all the inventory you need, and you've got to buy that in advance to then get the job done. So when you need suddenly to get something done like that, that's really what you want your lines of credit for. Right? You want to have that sort of immediate cash because it's floating rate. You also want to pay it back as soon as possible before rate changes, and you're going to pay it back as soon as the job's done. So you really want your line of credit to be this really super fast moving flow of money. And very, very rarely is your accountant ever going to recommend. I've met very, very few. I've been doing this 30 years. I hate to date myself, but that's true. You will rarely find an accountant who would want you to put a hard asset on a line of credit, again, for that reason. Like, you tie that up, and all of a sudden something comes up and you need cash, it's done, right? Because you've got a floating rate. So here you've got this big hard asset, this big piece of machinery sitting on a line of credit, and that rate's gonna bounce around. It's not ideal. It's not the right tool for the job. Your bank loan can be a really great product for a machine. They know you, you go in there, you should get a very aggressive rate with your bank, because they're going to take a blanket lien on the business, comes with a commercial loan. That's how they secure themselves. The more secure a loan is, the cheaper the rate. It's one of the reasons that mortgage rates are always so low, right? Very often, customers, I speak to someone and they say, well, I'm getting 2.5 on my house. Why is it, well, how can you be telling me that 4.5 is great on a machine? Like, it's not a house. Right? Again, it's not the asset, it's not real estate. So it's not the same security. Anyone can resell a house. Nobody really wants to resell a Rollforming. They don't want to come pick it up. The asset impacts the rates as well. So a bank who also is not necessarily in the industry, so to speak, of machinery and metal and things like that, they don't know what it is. Very often they'll say, well, we'll just take a lien on the whole business and we'll do 80%, they usually like 20% down, but they're gonna give you a great rate for all that security you've given them, okay, which is a lien on your whole business. And you're usually gonna give them financial disclosures, you're gonna give them tax returns, personal financial statements, and all of that. But for that, you're gonna get a really nice low rate, probably long-term, and it should be a fixed rate. So it can be a really nice tool to use for a big hard asset purchase. Leasing, probably heard about leasing lots of times. A capital lease is your dollar buyout lease, or a put is a purchase upon termination. You may have heard about that 10% at the end, purchase upon termination. Either way, it's a capital lease, you own it 100% at the end. They're fine tools for this type of purchase, for a machinery purchase. The only implication can be, in some states, you may have to pay sales tax, whereas if you do it on an EFA or a bank loan or a line of credit, you don't have to pay sales tax, because manufacturing machinery is often sales tax exempt, not your company, but the purchase. And if you don't know, tell me what state you're in and I'll let you know, because the state doesn't go around telling you that. So a lot of customers don't know that. But so it's the purchase itself, and all you do is go on your state website, you get yourself an exemption certificate for the purchase, and give it to your accountant at the end of the year. So, and that can save you a ton over a lifetime. And obviously per machine, and that's for a hand shear, a hand brake, big machine, doesn't matter. It's a manufacturing piece of machinery. Most states have an exemption or a reduction in sales tax. Let's get back. So a tax lease or a fair market value, that's the one where you've heard, I'm sure, over the years, people talk about off-balance sheet financing, fair market value. It's not, I don't own it, it's a lease, you know, I get the full write-off every month of the payment. Probably heard about this. I know, it's like all the rage. Anyway, but that's gone away. And the reason that that's really gone away over the years is because the fair market value on this type of machinery would be a disaster for you, right? So 5 years from now, if you wanted to buy this machine and all you did was rent it essentially for those 5 years, what are the chances that that value of the machine, no matter whose machine you bought, was going to be less than 10%? It's probably going to be 50%, 60%, 40%. So you're going to end up buying the machine twice easily. So the only people that make out on a fair market value is the bank. So do not fall for that on any type of manufacturing machine ever from people like us. Because there's people like us will try to do that. All right, so never, ever, ever. So if you do any type of lease, always make sure you have a dollar buyout at the end, or you have a purchase upon termination, and that there's a piece of paper that says I am buying this for 10%. So if it's a $100,000 machine, you're buying it for 10 grand at the end, or $1. Do not allow any language that says fair market value, and don't let anybody tell you a tax lease is a good thing on manufacturing equipment, because you literally have to buy it for its then fair market value. And if you say, well, I don't want to buy it, I'll just give it back. No, no, no. You have to package it up and send it back. Now, I don't think any one of you is going to want to be like, oh, okay, I'll just pick up my Rollforming and take it, hand it back, right? I mean, these are not toys, right? And most likely anything you do is not going to be, that's not the right tool. It used to be the right tool when we had computers, copiers, and fax machines, right? And you kept handing them in and getting new ones, and they would come and pick them up and give you a new one. But that doesn't exist anymore. Third-party financing, it's people like us, where you have what's called an EFA or a CFA. That's an equipment finance agreement or a commercial finance agreement. They come with fixed rates. It's 100% financing most of the time, unless credit driven. You know, if your credit requires a down payment for bruises or issues or startup companies. And it's application only programs, usually up to $500,000 in metal, as opposed to full tax disclosures and things like that. So a little bit different than the bank loan. Rate-wise, they're a much broader view. You're going to have your low rates for the stronger, the A credits, so you're going to have the 4s and the comparative rates to a bank, but you're also going to have the ability to approve where banks won't, because you're going to have lenders that will do someone with a recent bankruptcy, a startup. Most brick and mortar banks will only do been in business for 2 years. They won't, until you've been in business 2 years, don't talk to them. So there's a lot of variance that go through there. So rate-wise, you're going to have a much broader scale there. And ta-da! I know, that was so exciting, wasn't it, guys? All right, so anybody have any questions? Has anybody bought any machinery on any type of loan or finance in the past? Anybody thinking about doing it? Anybody want another piece of chocolate? Any questions at all? Where are you from?
Me?
Yes, you.
Denver.
Denver, okay. All right. All right, do you own your own company yet?
No, I do not.
Excellent.
So I actually work for a company that builds rollform equipment. So
In Denver?
yes,
You work for New Tech?
Canadian.
There's a one or two companies that it could be an option there. Okay. All right. Someday you want to own your own company?
Yes, I do.
Excellent.
But also trying to get some exposure to my customers and kind of
Right.
how they see it
Right.
as well.
Right, excellent, okay. Okay, well, there's certainly, if you are talking to customers who are needing, if you're showing your customer a machine and saying, it's $100,000, a $500,000 machine, or you can finance it, right? That conversation is really interesting because if they decide they're gonna go to their bank to finance it, you might hear back from them in a month. And that's fine, and you can also offer a company like ours and say, you know, we have a relationship with so-and-so, you know, call Steve, or may I have your permission to have Steve call you and discuss some options. And the value of that is now that person's gonna keep them and you connected to what's happening. Your customer is gonna tell them some things they don't tell you, and it'll speed the process along. Usually the time frame for a company like ours, if they're good at it, they're gonna get an approval up to 500,000 within 2 to 3 business days, because they're doing it without tax returns and so on, for an established company. Startups can take a little longer. Whereas a bank, even if they are an established company, even if they are good credit, their process is simply different. It's just a different animal. Not that they're slow, they're just different, right? It's like having a cat and a dog. Both pets, different, they're different. So it's just gonna take longer. But rate-wise, they're gonna be really similar if they're A credits. So it's nice to open that door for your customers. You know, they can compare, contrast, see what they like, what's the right tool for the job. So it's a good thing. It's a good thing to explore and have a partner in that at some point when you're ready. Where are you from? Your turn. Yeah, you.
Me? Oh,
You.
I'm from southeastern Ohio.
Okay. Do you have your own business yet?
No, work for my dad.
You work for your dad?
I would like to at least be a part owner of it.
I bet someday you will.
We have a small, standing team roll former.
Okay.
We roll our own metal, install metal, we wanna roll off form.
Excellent.
And right now, we're actually kind of in the process of, we wanna buy a brake,
Okay.
and so it's, yeah, interesting.
Okay, great. So there's lots of ways to buy it. Lots of ways to do it. And use somebody else's money to your advantage, for sure. Because, you know, keep your own cash, because you're gonna need to buy all that metal.
So do you have any perspective on at what point it becomes better to borrow rather than cash?
It's a matter of keeping how much cash you have available in your own account. So you wanna make sure you keep that sort of healthy ratio there. So, that's a conversation that if you guys wanted to have, I'd be happy to have. So what we do is we take a look at, we do a 1-page application, 3 months bank statements. We look at that and we go, okay, this is what we would approve you for. This is what rate, this is what the payments would look like. However, you know, there are times that cash is the right answer, you know, and from what I can see here, unless you really need, you know, a different kind of write-off, unless you have a different purpose for your cash, unless you know something else is coming up, maybe it's time to write a check. You know, and certainly fourth quarter, a lot of times in fourth quarter, people need to write checks, get that money out of the company. But a lot of accountants are like, just sign the loan, and I'm gonna write it off anyway. So, you know, we are ridiculously busy in December, because the last week of Christmas, we're all through, and right up and through New Year's, and they're going, just get us approved, so my accountant says I just have to sign it, and I can get the write-off, because otherwise I'm in trouble. Like, okay. And that's up to their accountant. Now, technically, it's supposed to be on your floor. You're supposed to have the machine, okay? I don't know if any IRS agent's ever been to anybody's place to see if anything was actually there at the time, 2 years before, by the time you're getting audited, but that's how it's supposed to happen. People do what they're comfortable with.
So technically, as soon as you have that loan, you get the full amount of the loan?
Yes, because that's section 179 we talked about, you can take the whole amount that year. So if somebody finds out near the end of the year, they're gonna have a huge tax liability, all of a sudden they're like, yeah, okay, we need to buy that machine, we need to buy it now.
That makes sense.
Alright, let's do it now. And if all they really need to do is get approved, get the machine ordered, we get out the deposit, right? Most of these machines need somewhere between a 30 and 50% deposit. So we send the wire out, because the loan is approved, they signed the document, they gave us a check for one payment, but we sent out $100,000, or $50,000, or $200,000, whatever the number is that's required. That loan is booked, that invoice is paid, the accountant's happy, the customer's happy, and you met all the check boxes. So yeah, there's a lot of times that makes sense.